I'm Sloan Bennett, 35, former military systems liaison, disgraced daughter, erased developer of Project EchoSafe, and today I've been invited back not for recognition, not for reconciliation, but to serve wine. Be discreet, my sister said. There will be donors. What they don't know is I never stopped watching, never stopped recording, and definitely never stopped remembering. 3 years ago, I walked out of the Bennett estate with nothing but a flash drive and a silent promise. Today, I walk back in with a uniform they tried to strip from me, a hard drive they forgot existed, and a story they thought I'd never live to tell. Before I show you what happened when the truth interrupted brunch, tell me, have you ever been dismissed by the very people who needed your silence to survive? If so, you're not alone. Like this video, subscribe, because this time, the silence is mine to break. The silence on my end stretched longer than socially acceptable, but I let it hang heavy and deliberate like fog choking a valley. Vanessa hated silence. She thrived on responses, reactions, rebuttals. I gave her none. Well, she prompted, her voice chipper and glinting with smugness like a spoon tapping crystal. I heard you, I said finally, my tone flat clinical. Oh, good. Just wanted to make sure your phone still works, she said with that saccharine smile I could picture perfectly, her face tilted just enough to make the gold studs in her ears catch the light. We're hosting the family fundraiser at the house this year, Saturday through Sunday. Be there by 4. Wear something festive. It had been 3 years since I last stepped foot on Bennett marble. 3 years since that night I supposedly embarrassed myself. No one mentioned how Vanessa had whispered lies behind glasses of Pinot, or how Dad refused to shake my hand after I told the truth about the vendor fraud. No, the only narrative that survived was that Sloan cracked. Your job still, exists. Vanessa continued, unable to resist. I mean, you've always been into your little tech projects, but the family just worries. I'm still employed. I cut in, keeping my voice neutral. Still living. Well, great, that's great. We need extra hands anyway. Mom's already swamped. I glanced around my one-bedroom apartment, white walls, rows of books organized by topic, a single plant stubbornly thriving in the window. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. And it was clean. Honest. I'll come, I said. Vanessa blinked audibly through the line. Oh, wow, okay then. She didn't expect that. I could almost hear her scramble to reorient the power dynamic. Perfect. Just be discreet, yeah. We'll have donors there, and no speeches. Don't worry, I know my place, I said. As I hung up, the smile on my lips wasn't soft, it was surgical. I rose, crossing the room to the tall oak cabinet bolted into the wall. My fingers found the hidden latch beneath the second shelf, a tiny metal catch no one would notice unless they were looking. The iron box inside was cold. I hadn't opened it in almost a year. The lock still recognized my fingerprint. It clicked open with a satisfying snick, revealing the contents like a magician's final flourish. A badge marked with the Department of Defense, seal my name beneath it, Lieutenant Sloan M. Bennett Systems Security Liaison, and a folded memo stamped Top Secret, Project EchoSafe. The sight didn't move me. Not anymore. It was just a part of who I was. The version of me no one at the Bennett mansion ever acknowledged. They saw the disappointment, the dropout, the girl who didn't follow the path they'd paved in money and obligation. I saw something else. Below the memo was a photo, not of family, but of a server rack glowing faint blue in a blacked-out room, and below it, a handwritten code. I closed the box slowly, deliberately, as if sealing away a weapon. I had a reason to go now. Not to serve drinks. Not even to smile and pretend. This time, I'd go because they opened the door, and I intended to walk through with both hands full. Fine, I whispered to the quiet, echoing the words into the dim apartment. I'll be there. And I'll bring the wine and a surprise. The gates creaked open just as they did when I left 3 years ago. Only this time, I had the upper hand. The sound was almost ceremonial metal dragging over stone, announcing not just arrival, but return. I gripped the steering wheel of the rental tighter, pulse steady. It wasn't my car, not my name on the lease, but it didn't matter. I wasn't here to make statements with horsepower or license plates. I was here to observe, to infiltrate, and eventually to detonate. The Bennett estate loomed ahead, bathed in amber security lights and shaded by manicured oaks. It always felt like the kind of house that had secrets in the walls. Its windows didn't reflect. They stared. I parked off to the side, away from the front like I knew they'd want. The last time I'd walked through that door, I was 28 3 drinks in and shouting about ethics over roasted duck. This time, I was sober and sharper. As I approached the steps, the heavy oak door swung open, not by staff, but by Lorraine Finch. She stood smaller than I remembered, her gray curls pinned neatly aproned spotless. But her eyes, the same brown eyes that used to sneak me cookies behind Mother's back, flickered with something unspoken. "Sloane," she said gently. "Lorraine," I answered. The corner of her mouth twitched upward before smoothing out again. "You're early." "I wanted to get a lay of the land," I said, and she nodded the way someone nods when they hear one thing but register another. Inside, the air smelled like beeswax and lemon oil, polished opulence. The foyer was just as I remembered: marble floors, grand staircase, oil portraits of Bennett's past. The silence was ceremonial, except for the faint sound of classical music drifting from the parlor. Vanessa didn't come to greet me. No one did. "You'll be staying in the West Room," Lorraine said, taking my coat. "They had the gardener clear it out yesterday." "The gardener?" I asked. "They're short-staffed," she said softly, eyes flicking to the hallway. "That's what they say." She handed me a house key, the kind that wouldn't open anything important. As I took it, our fingers brushed. Hers were cold. "They'll want drinks served on the patio soon." She added, her voice loud enough to echo down the corridor. "I assume you remember where the wine is kept." The implication wasn't lost on me. I remember. The kitchen was still on the other side of the estate, tucked away behind the servants' entrance and a dumbwaiter system nobody used anymore. It was cooler here, quieter, and, ironically, the most honest part of the house. As I passed the dining room, I caught a glimpse of Nathaniel, hair slicked back, jaw sharp, wearing a navy cashmere sweater as if it were a crown. He didn't look at me, just lifted a glass of scotch and kept talking to an investor I vaguely recognized from a Wall Street Journal spread. Gregory sat in his usual spot by the fireplace, fingers templed, eyes on the flames. He didn't acknowledge me, but I felt his gaze all the same. It was the same silence he used when he disapproved. It hadn't changed. By the time I made it to the kitchen, my knuckles ached from clenched fists. Lorraine was already there, slicing pears. "You shouldn't have come," she murmured without turning around. "I had no choice." She dried her hands, stepped close, and glanced toward the door. "Here," she whispered, slipping a folded piece of paper into my hand so quickly it could have been mistaken for a napkin. I unfolded it behind the counter. Subject: Project EchoSafe Progress Update. From Nathaniel G. Bennett to Private Investors List. B. I've overseen the security framework personally. Thanks to my leadership, EchoSafe has passed early-stage DoD vetting and is positioned for a Q1 rollout. My breath caught. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "He left it in the printer tray last week," Lorraine said. "He thought he shredded it. Did you tell anyone else?" "No," she said. "But if he finds out I gave it to you, he won't." I folded the paper carefully, tucking it into the pocket inside my blazer. My mind raced. If Nathaniel was using EchoSafe to boost investor confidence, then someone had either hacked my Pentagon clearance or he had access I never approved. Either way, it was a thread. A very valuable one. Footsteps echoed near the dining entrance. Lorraine turned away, busying herself with slicing more fruit. I straightened, plastered a smile on my face, and reached for a bottle of Pinot Noir. "More wine," I said, stepping into the hallway with the bottle cradled in my hand, like it was nothing more than fermented grapes and not the prelude to war. "To family," Nathaniel said, raising his glass. "And to those who know their place." The clinking of crystal reverberated across the hall like a choreographed threat. Laughter followed, some of it genuine, most of it forced. I stood near the drinks table, a folded towel over my arm, holding a tray of flutes like a well-trained shadow. My fingers twitched around the base of the tray, but I kept my smile intact. Polished. Neutral. Exactly what they expected from me. The banquet hall shimmered with excess chandeliers refracting soft gold, tall floral centerpieces, trays of imported cheeses no one would touch. The scent of lilac and money clung to the walls. Guests milled in silken suits, most of them pretending not to recognize me, others whispering behind well-manicured hands. I caught snippets. Sloane, I thought she moved out west. Worked in cybersecurity or something. A startup, maybe. Heard she had some mental health thing after the fundraiser. They smiled at me when I passed, but not the way you smile at a person. More like how you smile at a dress mannequin in a shop window. Vanessa glided over with a full glass of Merlot, her laugh high and hollow. "Oh, Sloane," she cooed. "Be careful." Too late. Her elbow accidentally knocked the glass sideways, deep red cascading across my cream-colored dress in a flourish of fake regret. "Oh no," she gasped. "Clumsy me." I stared down at the spreading stain, warm and sticky against my skin. The guests around us watched, not rushing to help, just savoring the theater. Gregory's voice rang out from his spot near the fireplace. "Vanessa, be reasonable." He didn't look at me. Of course he didn't. "I'll get it," I said, already kneeling to blot the mess with the towel. My knees pressed into the marble, the cold cutting through the thin fabric of my dress pants. Someone chuckled. Someone else whispered. I heard the words intern and poor thing. I wasn't listening to them. I was listening to the vibration in my pocket. A low, insistent buzz, my phone set to silent. I slipped a hand inside my blazer to check the caller ID. G. Kim, DoD clearance. 2. My breath hitched. I stood ignoring the murmurs and stepped toward the side hallway leading to the entry alcove. The lights there were softer, dimmer, the place where late arrivals slipped in unnoticed. But not this one. The front door opened with a low groan. He stepped in with clean lines and precise posture, his uniform sharp metals polished and eyes scanning with intent. Lieutenant Colonel Gregory Kim. Every time I'd met him before had been in a secure facility or underground server bunker. He didn't do parties. He didn't do family events. And he never bowed. Until now. He caught sight of me near the entrance and with complete composure inclined his head. "Ma'am," he said. Not loudly. Just enough for the room to hear. The impact was seismic. A hush rippled outward like a pebble dropped into still water. I could feel it, the freezing of movement, the shift in posture, the sudden recalibration of every person in the hall. The chatter evaporated mid-sentence. Champagne flutes paused halfway to lips. Even Vanessa's mouth hung slightly open. And suddenly the room went quiet. Even the champagne bubbles stopped. They watched me vanish into the hallway. They didn't know I walked straight to the security room. Let them speculate. Let them guess I was wounded or embarrassed or shaken by the sight of a decorated military officer bowing to me like I outranked their entire family. I let them believe whatever made them sleep at night. But I wasn't heading to the guest room to change or to cry or to call a friend for comfort. I was going underground. The door to the basement still stuck at the bottom, just like it did when I was 16, and Gregory insisted I put my nerd skills to use by wiring the estate with an internal surveillance system. He didn't want to pay for professionals. He wanted control, the kind only a Bennett could engineer. He didn't think I remembered the access codes. He didn't think I kept the override protocols. He didn't think I'd ever come back. The air grew colder with each creaking step down the spiral staircase, the scent of old dust and oxidized metal thickening. The Bennett mansion aged like a museum, externally glamorous, internally full of forgotten rooms and dangerous stories. The security room was behind a heavy steel door that still bore the nameplate I'd etched as a joke. Bennett Systems Control unauthorized entry will be logged. The warning blinked on a flickering green screen, powered by a system so ancient I was shocked it still booted up. I typed in the override B3NN3TTT-S3, Cure 17. 2 beeps. Green light. Welcome back, Sloane. I flicked the overhead switch and the fluorescent sputtered to life, casting pale light over server racks, wall monitors, and dust-laden keyboards. The chairs were the same. The grainy carpet was the same. Even the smell was the same: machine oil and wires. I sat down, steady hands skimming across the console like returning to an old piano. The system OS was primitive, but I'd left back doors no one ever noticed. Within seconds, I was in. Cameras, backups, logs all running. Upstairs, the muffled sound of movement. Footsteps. A faint laugh. Then a creak. Someone entering the kitchen. I reached for the comms panel and typed in a silent ping LO. Need cover. Now. The reply was instant V distracting V. 10 mins. Make it count. Low Lorraine, ever the ghost. I launched into the archive footage, filtering by last Thursday, the day the investor emails were timestamped. My fingers flew across keys, skimming through feeds of the library dining room conservatory. There, library cam. Audio engaged. The timestamp blinked, 17:32:44. Gregory's voice, first low and composed. She'd never understand. It's not theft, it's adaptation. Nathaniel. She left it. Left us. The project needed a name behind it, a pedigree. I gave it one. Gregory, your name opens doors. Nathaniel, and EchoSafe opens vaults. Then another voice. Vanessa. She thinks being alone is freedom, she said, a laugh. Let her enjoy it while it lasts. My hands tightened on the mouse. I zoomed in on their faces' confirmed identities. Nathaniel in his tailored navy jacket, pacing with a whiskey glass. Gregory seated, brows furrowed. Vanessa draped over the couch like she was auditioning for a perfume ad. They were so sure, so casual, so stupid. I clipped the video segment, isolated it, encrypted it with a layered key, then transferred it to a fresh USB marked with an unassuming serial code. It slid into my pocket with the weight of a silent verdict. This was step one. I opened the backup server for redundancy and copied the same file to a secondary hidden location in cloud storage, just in case. I'd learned enough about risk mitigation to never keep a secret in only one place. Last step labeling. I pulled up the file name screen and typed Reckoning, MP4. I paused for a moment, staring at the word. It looked right. It felt right. Then I smiled. Miss Sloane. Lorraine whispered, I know more than they think I do. Her voice was just above a breath, shaped by the scent of oak barrels and damp stone. We were standing in the old wine cellar behind the kitchen, the one no one used anymore because Vanessa insisted on installing a modern glass cabinet in the dining hall for her curated reds. But Lorraine had the old key. Of course she did. The light from the lone overhead bulb was dim and yellow, casting long shadows on the brick walls. Rain tapped faintly against the vents, a slow, rhythmic pulse that added to the illusion that we were buried below time itself. This room had heard things: late-night arguments, deals between uncles and cousins, whispered insults during weddings. But none of those things were what brought us here tonight. I stood in silence, my back still warm from the adrenaline of the last 24 hours. The spilled wine, the military salute, the flickering surveillance footage now living quietly on my USB. Lorraine was watching me. I'd forgotten how steady her gaze could be. She moved toward one of the side cabinets, a false one I hadn't noticed before. With practiced ease, she pulled it open, revealing a cloth-wrapped bundle beneath layers of dust and old receipts. She unwrapped it like something sacred, setting it gently on the barrel between us. A hard drive. Thick, heavy, dated. I saved it all, she said, her fingers brushing the casing. Every time they came in here thinking no one was listening. They think I'm just background noise. I ran my hand across the surface. How far back does this go? Months, she said. Some before you got the invitation, some from the night of your last fundraiser. My heart stilled for a second. That night was still a blur of anger and rejection. To think it had been recorded, remembered by more than just the muscles of my jaw, and the tremble in my hand sent a fresh ripple through my spine. Why? I asked, genuinely unsure. She hesitated, her eyes softening. Because I saw what they did to you, she said. That night, when they threw you out, Gregory told the staff to delete your access codes. Said you were a risk. But I left one open. Printer room 3. You fixed it in high school, remember? When it jammed and I couldn't print my sister's will. I remember, I said quietly. You were just a girl, she whispered. They treated you like an inconvenience. But I knew. I knew you were sharp and I knew you'd come back. They always underestimate the quiet ones. I couldn't speak for a moment. Then she added, "You're not the only one they've hurt. I've watched it for years. The controlling, the erasing, the lies. But I never had proof. Until now." I picked up the hard drive. It was colder than the air solid in my hands. No label. No logo. Just raw data waiting to detonate. "You should announce something," she said at Sunday brunch. "When they're all pretending to be civilized. When the masks are on tightest." I looked up at her, a hint of a smile forming. "You've thought this through." "I've had time," she replied. "And I've had ears." Then she stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint scar under her left eye, a detail I'd forgotten. "Miss Sloane," she said, her voice firmer now, "do it not just for revenge. Do it for truth." The air shifted. Something inside me, not rage, not bitterness, but clarity, settled like dust after a storm. I held the drive like it was a weapon. Because it was. The key was never in the drawer, it was always in the frame. I whispered it to myself like a spell, as I stood in Gregory Bennett's office, the cold light of early November seeping in through the tall windows. The room hadn't changed in years. Heavy oak desk, dark leather chairs, no one ever sat in, books stacked not by interest, but by spine color. It was a room built for intimidation, for declaration, not for truth. I ran a finger along the polished edges of the photo frames on the wall. Every single one of them was of Nathaniel. Nathaniel with a medal. Nathaniel shaking hands with someone from MIT. Nathaniel in a golf tournament, even though he hates golf. But not a single one of me. Not even from childhood. The only photo I ever remembered hanging here, of me taken when I was 12 holding my first robotics competition trophy, had disappeared shortly after I turned down the internship he arranged at his friend's hedge fund. I moved to the photo nearest the bookshelf, lifted it gently. The back was plain secured by 2 rusted metal tabs. I pulled them back and peeled away the rear panel. And there it was, a small brass key taped to the backing. I didn't need a map. I knew the wall safe by heart. It sat behind the painting of an old battleship, a gift from a Navy friend, always slightly crooked. I slid the canvas aside and inserted the key. Click. The safe door creaked open, revealing a neat stack of sealed folders and one black moleskin notebook. I pulled them out one by one, laying them on the desk like evidence on a crime board. The top folder held a contract. Project EcoSafe licensing agreement. But the signature line didn't have my name. It had Nathaniel's. The entire first page was covered in Department of Defense letterhead, but the contact listed for the technical lead was not me, despite my code being embedded in every layer of the platform. The metadata had been stripped, reassigned. There was a forged timeline showing Nathaniel and Gregory proposing the concept 6 months before I ever presented it. I kept reading. The next file was a stack of printed emails. I froze when I saw the sender. From Sloan.BennettDevMail.Tech to investors, ablackravencapital.com. But I had never sent these. The body of the message described a funding proposal with technical specifications, most of them correct, but twisted in just enough ways to suggest that I had voluntarily handed the rights over to my brother. It was a fictional narrative, written in my voice. I scanned the email headers. The digital signature looked intact at a glance, but a deeper dive would prove it was spoofed. Anyone with high-level access and a little desperation could have created it. I plugged in my secondary USB, smaller, encrypted, hidden inside a faux lipstick tube, and began the backup process. The files loaded fast screen, blinking through hundreds of lines of data. Then I saw it. A letter tucked into the back of the safe, sealed but unmarked. I opened it carefully. From Office of the Undersecretary of Defense Tech Acquisitions to Miss Vanessa Bennett, not Gregory, not Nathaniel. Vanessa. The letter confirmed receipt of proprietary documentation regarding Project EcoSafe and referenced anticipated executive-level coordination within the private sector, naming Vanessa as primary liaison and provisional steward of Bennett Technologies' intellectual portfolio. I stared at it, pulse rising. So that was the plan. Vanessa wasn't just a spoiled accessory. She was a proxy. Gregory funneled everything through Nathaniel to the DoD, then diverted the actual control to Vanessa, possibly to avoid direct liability, possibly because she was more manipulable, or maybe because she demanded it. And all of it my name. My work, my ownership had been methodically erased. I leaned back in the chair, surrounded by their smiling faces in frames and the cold silence of betrayal dressed in contracts. So it wasn't just betrayal, it was redistribution, with my name erased. We didn't know she still had access. The words came out of Nathaniel's mouth like he was chewing on metal. I could tell he didn't mean to say them out loud, not in front of everyone. But that's the thing about cracks. Once they start, they don't stop until something breaks. Saturday lunch was always Gregory's idea of controlled civility. He liked the illusion of normalcy linen napkins folded into triangles, fresh sourdough from some overpriced bakery, a dry rose chilled just slightly too long. The side dining room, though less ostentatious than the main hall, still reeked of curated wealth. Marble floors, colonial molding, and a mirror that probably cost more than my apartment. I took my seat at the far end directly across from Vanessa. She smiled the way people do when they've practiced it in front of a mirror. Nathaniel scrolled through something on his phone while Gregory pretended not to glance over. The guest beside him, Mr. Collins, I believe, was from New York. He wore a navy blazer, military posture intact despite the years. Former acquisitions officer, now investor. He hadn't spoken much since arriving, but I caught him watching me during hors d'oeuvres. I let the silence linger. Then casually I said, "It's funny, I've been thinking about acoustic firewalls again. You know how internal comms used to be filtered through echo frequency distortion algorithms?" Gregory's fork paused mid-cut. Nathaniel blinked. I let the sentence dangle like a thread between us. Not enough to be direct, but just precise enough that anyone who knew defense systems would smell the smoke. Collins leaned forward, slightly brow furrowed. Echo frequency distortion. That's EchoSafe's core, isn't it? Vanessa's smile froze. Nathaniel looked up, eyes hard now. I swirled my water glass slowly. Well, yes, the principles behind it, but it wasn't EchoSafe back then. Just a concept I prototyped in 2017 when I was still working on encrypted multi-layer sound filtration. Gregory probably remembers. My father didn't flinch, not yet, but the vein at his temple pulsed. Collins chuckled. That's wild. I could have sworn it was your brother's name on the DoD filing. My old contact mentioned the EchoSafe system had something like that under the hood. Nathaniel interjected stiffly. There were several contributors. It was a joint family project. I tilted my head. Is that what they're calling code theft now? Gregory's knife clinked against his plate. Collins raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I continued placing my napkin gently beside my plate. You're right, I don't have official access to this house anymore. Vanessa made sure of that. But, funny thing about legacy code, sometimes it remembers me. There it was, the tremor. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. Gregory looked over at him just for a second, and that was enough. I turned to Collins, smiling. You ever wonder why some firewalls still let certain signals through ghost logins? Silent ping, subtle echoes in the system. Collins laughed. Only every day since 2010. Vanessa tried to steer the conversation. Let's not bore everyone with tech. But Collins waved her off, still intrigued. Wait, so, were you part of the original EchoSafe build? I met his gaze, clear and steady. No, I wasn't part of it. Vanessa exhaled like she'd won. I designed the acoustic firewall behind it, I added. The air collapsed. Gregory slammed his glass onto the table, red wine sloshing over his cuff. Nathaniel shoved his chair back and stood. No one said a word. And that silence? That was mine. They finally realized I came with strategy, not sentiment. The words echoed in my head as I sat at the farthest corner of a tiny cafe tucked behind an ivy-covered stone wall, just 2 blocks from the Bennett estate. It was one of those unassuming places, worn wood floors, uneven tables, the smell of burnt espresso lingering like an old argument. And it was perfect. Gregory would never step foot in a place without valet parking. Across from me, attorney Lydia Reynolds leaned back, examining the USB in her hand like it was a lit match. You're sure this is everything? she asked, her voice low but firm. Her glasses reflected the gray light pouring through the rain-streaked window. It's enough, I said. Metadata email headers, surveillance footage, internal audio logs, plus a scan of the forged licensing agreement, even a DoD letter to Vanessa. Reynolds opened her leather portfolio and slipped the USB inside, then took the neatly folded printouts I'd brought. She was deliberate in the way she handled everything. Slow, professional, the kind of caution you learn after being burned in courtrooms one too many times. You realize what you're asking, she said. We're not talking about just filing a corporate ownership complaint or a cease and desist. You're calling out defense procurement fraud, intellectual property theft, and coordinated defamation by your own family. I met her eyes. Correct. She tapped her pen against the folder twice, then sighed. And the restraining order. I want it ready to be filed by Monday morning, but only if they retaliate before Sunday brunch. She didn't smile, but her eyes flickered with something close to admiration. And the press? I've already asked Colonel Kim to brief 2 trusted defense correspondents. Anonymous source for now, but if they dig correctly, they'll land on Vanessa's transfer letter by Sunday. Reynolds nodded slowly. This could ruin the Bennett legacy forever. That's the plan. Just as she began organizing the documents, my phone buzzed. I tilted it slightly to shield the screen. A text from Lorraine. Vanessa just ordered the hard drive removed, trying to cover her tracks. I quickly typed back, let her try, already backed up X3, firewall is bait. Reynolds didn't ask to read it, but she raised an eyebrow as I tucked the phone away. I assume you've considered every retaliation route. Vanessa's too impulsive. She acts like she's 3 moves ahead, but she always forgets to guard her queen. I gestured toward the printouts. This time, the queen bites first. Rain ticked softly against the window, a metronome for everything about to fall apart. She reached into her coat pocket and handed me a small folder. Here's your signed affidavit draft. I'll polish it tonight, you review, and we send it once brunch begins. That's when the media hits correct. 11 sharp. And the military. Kim will handle it. He's waiting for the public slip-up. Once Vanessa or Gregory makes a false claim in front of guests or the press, he'll confirm it's fraud. Reynolds gave a short, approving nod. Then we're at check. No, I said, standing and slipping on my coat. This was the opening. Sunday is checkmate. She didn't stop me as I walked out. Outside, the wind had picked up, slicing down the sidewalk with a wet chill. I pulled my coat tighter and took a slow breath. It wasn't over. But for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was initiating. I was making the moves they never expected from the girl they thought they'd silenced. And this board, it was mine now. If you try to burn me, make sure I'm not the one holding the match. I didn't know who said it first, but tonight it didn't feel like a quote. It felt like prophecy. The mansion was quieter than usual, as if even its walls sensed the storm gathering just outside the windows. I had retreated to the guest room Gregory assigned me, ironic considering it used to be mine before they stripped it bare and filled it with antique nonsense. Now it was all neutral tones and polite furniture, like the soul had been vacuumed out of the place. I sat on the bed back, stiff eyes locked on the screen in front of me. Vanessa's post had gone up 10 minutes ago, a burner account, but the tone was unmistakable. She had used that same cadence when we were kids, playful on the surface, venom underneath. Isn't it sad when someone clings to the past because they've got no future? Imagine being dismissed from a classified project because of emotional volatility. Just saying, had family drama, hashtag when she snaps. By the time I finished reading it, already had over 100 likes and 24 comments from our circle. Colleagues, former classmates, even a few family friends chiming in with laughing emojis. Gregory hadn't commented, but I saw a familiar handle under one of the replies. We always knew something was off. The same phrase he used when he fired me. My chest tightened, not because I didn't expect it, but because they still thought this was just another cycle where I would break down, disappear, and stay silent. I scrolled further, watching the web stretch. Whispered texts from the dining hall, private DMs probably circling back to our investors. I could picture Vanessa smirking behind a glass of wine, thinking she'd won the psychological round. I stood up, paced. Should I call Reynolds? No. Not yet. This wasn't the final strike. It was noise meant to rattle, to discredit me before the truth took root. And for a second, I almost let it work. Almost. My phone buzzed. Lorraine. I opened the message. It was just one line. She got sloppy. Attached was an audio file. I sat down, plugged in my earpiece, and hit play. Vanessa's voice filled my ear like static, drowning out reason. She was laughing. Of course I had him say he was DoD certified. How else was I going to get Sloan pulled from the rotation? She had no idea he was just a contractor from my Pilates class. We switched the documentation, rerouted her clearances, and bam, she was out. All because she couldn't shut up at that dinner. Someone in the background, probably. Nathaniel chuckled. She went on. She kept thinking it was Dad. But really, it was me. I just needed her off the board long enough to get full control over EchoSafe's assets. It's not personal. It's precision. Click. Silence. I didn't move for a long time. My hands strangely didn't tremble. Instead, I leaned forward, hit replay. This time, I didn't listen for her cruelty. I listened for her mistake. She had named the contractor, described the switch, tied herself directly to the fraudulent clearance maneuver enough to bury her and everyone who signed off on the paperwork. And just like that, the last crack in my resolve sealed shut. I looked around the sterile room, once mine, now stripped of any real memory. I saw the portrait of Nathaniel on the dresser, the neutral decor meant to erase my presence, the closed door behind me. Then I smiled, because tomorrow wasn't just brunch, it was judgment. This isn't revenge. This is a release. I whispered the words aloud, not because I needed to hear them again, but because I needed the room to hear them. The study, once my grandfather's sanctuary, absorbed my voice like a vow. It still smelled of old leather and faded ambition. The curtains were half drawn, casting slanted beams across the desk where he taught me strategy, silence, and the weight of words. If there was any place to put things in order, it was here. The desk was cluttered not with mess, but with precision. One pile held printouts, the licensing agreement forged in Gregory's safe. Next to it, the transcript from the hidden hallway recording Vanessa's voice ringing clear in black ink. I ran my fingers over the pages, steadying each one before setting it down in a labeled folder. A second pile was audio. Lorraine had cleaned up the recordings, noise-filtered voices isolated. I listened to them again, marking timestamps, when Nathaniel bragged to investors, when Gregory mentioned ownership shift, when Vanessa laughed about switching my clearance. I typed out a timeline and stapled it to the front page. I had 2 USB drives, one silver, one matte black. Redundant storage. If one failed, the other would survive. I labeled them discreetly R1 and R2. I put R1 in my purse. R2 would go into the lining of my coat. The envelope marked Kim would stay with me until noon. I opened my laptop, typed out the speech. Not long, just sharp. You called me back to serve wine. You mocked my presence, erased my name. But here's the thing about being overlooked. We see everything, and I've kept the receipts. I paused, deleted the last line, rewrote it. And this time, I won't be silent. Better. There was a knock at the side door. I didn't flinch. Lorraine entered quietly, holding a cup of tea in one hand, a folded napkin in the other. She set both down beside the folders, her face serious but calm. You've got them cornered, she said, lowering her voice. Just don't forget why you started this. I haven't, I replied, and I'm not doing it to win. I'm doing it so the truth walks in on its own 2 feet. She nodded, then hesitated. Vanessa might try something. She's been pacing since dawn. Let her. I didn't look up from the keyboard. Let her talk. I've got the final word. My phone buzzed. I answered before the second ring. Sloan. Gregory Kim's voice came through low and direct. Just confirming I'll be at the brunch at 12 sharp. I'll stand near the main window. You'll have my full attention. I'll have more than that. I said, my voice colder than I intended. You'll have the truth. There was a pause, then a quiet chuckle. See you at brunch. The call ended, I printed 3 packets, one for Kim, one for Nathaniel's legal team, one for the table. The printer groaned like it knew what I was doing. I ignored it. Each page slid into place with a satisfying snap. Then I wrote a single email. Subject line, immediate review required. No salutation, no small talk, just the facts. I attached the summary file, the primary recordings, and screenshots. I copied Nathaniel's personal attorney. Hit encrypt. Waited. The moment before hitting send felt longer than it should have. But then, see you at brunch. I pressed send. They handed me a tray of drinks. I handed them a subpoena. The moment I stepped into the main lobby in full uniform, the air shifted. I heard the forks pause, mid-air, glasses stilled. A few murmurs rippled like a slow-moving wave across the room. Some guests squinted, not sure what they were looking at. Others recognized the insignia on my jacket, the ribbons that hadn't seen sunlight in years. I didn't wear them for show. I wore them because I earned them. The last time I stood in this lobby, I was told to be useful and serve drinks. This time, I carried a sealed legal envelope and a small USB drive inside my coat. Lorraine caught my eye from across the room and gave the slightest nod. A silent drumroll began in my chest. Vanessa was standing near the mimosa bar, laughing too loudly with a military contractor from Boston. Nathaniel loomed near the fireplace, speaking to an investor whose smile had a price tag. Gregory sat in the center like a retired emperor, untouchable, unreadable, but not unshakable. Not today. I moved toward the podium slowly, each step echoing with calculated control. At the exact moment the brunch music faded just after the second verse of a too cheery jazz number, I raised my hand. "I apologize for interrupting," I said, voice steady, "but before we toast to unity, there are some matters to address." A ripple of discomfort. Vanessa's jaw stiffened. To my left, Reynolds, my attorney, stepped forward and handed an envelope to the Department of Defense liaison. She opened it, scanned the header, then turned to Gregory and Nathaniel with the practiced disapproval of a woman used to men in suits, thinking they were smarter than protocol. "This is a formal inquiry," she announced, "into possible misrepresentation of technological origins and fraudulent disclosure of Project EchoSafe." Nathaniel choked on his drink. The projector behind me lit up. First slide, a screenshot of the forged contract from Gregory's safe, my name crudely erased. Nathaniel's signature stamped on a licensing deal dated before I was even removed from the project. Gasps floated through the room like smoke. Second slide, the transcript of a conversation, Gregory whispering about redistribution and Vanessa promising a cleaner image without Sloan in the way. Third, Vanessa on video laughing to her boyfriend. She thinks she's off the grid. Cute. I didn't speak over the noise. I let the room digest it. Let the silence chew through their confusion. I stood tall, no shaking, no blinking. Reynolds leaned into the microphone. "All files are verifiable. Additional evidence has been submitted to both the Department and the U.S. Copyright Office. A federal investigation may follow." Someone in the back applauded. One person, then another. Then it spread like wildfire. The military representative turned to me, looked straight at the medals on my chest, and nodded. "Thank you for your service, ma'am," she said loud enough for every seated guest, every hovering assistant, and every whispering investor to hear. Vanessa's face drained of all color. Gregory's lips parted, but no words came. And then, without a sound, Vanessa turned on her heel and bolted into the house. Her heels clipped the marble with a frantic staccato, one that would echo longer than my words ever needed to. I didn't follow. I didn't have to. The evidence was in the open. The silence finally wasn't mine. A kingdom built on lies doesn't crumble. It implodes. The heavy doors of the conference room closed behind the last brunch guest, sealing the air like a tomb. The scent of burnt espresso and sour champagne lingered stale under the weight of everything unsaid. The long oak table gleamed under antique lighting, but the elegance did little to hide the rot it had hosted for decades. At one end, Vanessa sat frozen, her back rigid, fingers clenched around the stem of a glass she hadn't touched. At the other, Gregory tapped a silver pen against a notepad, a slow, hypnotic rhythm that failed to disguise his unraveling. Nathaniel slumped in his chair, staring into the glossy surface as if it might swallow him. I stood in the center of it all, calm, composed, and ready. Reynolds placed the thick folder down on the table, flipping it open like a judge delivering a sentence. "This," he said, gesturing to the USB drive now projected onto the screen, "is the final compilation of direct evidence of financial misappropriation, document forgery, and identity erasure. Origin Project EchoSafe." I clicked to the next slide, a wire transfer record, tens of thousands funneled out of the EchoSafe discretionary fund. Each line bore Vanessa's name in the beneficiary field, some from 2 years ago, some as recent as 4 months. "No," Vanessa whispered. "That's not. You can't." "Cross-checked against your secondary bank account in Delaware," Reynolds replied, not even looking at her, "where you listed your profession as private consultant in emerging technologies." The room went still. Next slide, a transcript of the recording Lorraine had risked everything to get to me. Vanessa gloating to her boyfriend about faking a military affiliation to discredit me. The audio played clearly now, her voice sharp and distinct. "She thinks she still has relevance. We just needed a cleaner PR arc." Vanessa shot up, knocking the glass to the floor. "You think you're Noble Sloan? You don't belong here. You never did." I raised one hand, calm, controlled. "But you needed my name, my credentials, my designs. That's what made it marketable. You erased me, but I archived everything." The lights flickered briefly as the next page flashed on screen, a facsimile dated August 2021. Gregory's handwriting in the margins clearly legible, reassigned to Nathaniel. "Budget needs headline project. Delay patent." Gregory leaned forward, finally still, his face pale, jaw clenched. Nathaniel turned slowly toward him, expression crumbling. "You," Nathaniel began, voice raw, "you said it was temporary, that you'd fix it once we secured funding." Gregory didn't move. "I signed because you told me it would be cleaned up, that Sloan didn't have legal standing anymore." He was unraveling in real time, sweat gathering at his temple. "I followed the plan, Dad. I followed your plan." Gregory blinked. Then with an eerie steadiness he looked up. His voice, when it came, was low and sharp as a blade. "Everyone out. Family only." No one moved for a second. Then the others obeyed the witnesses, the old military friends, even Reynolds. Kim looked at me, hesitation in his eyes, but I gave a nod. The doors clicked shut behind them. Now it was just us, the Bennetts. And the implosion had only just begun. Blood ties mean nothing when trust is amputated. The reading room door closed with a sound too soft for the weight it held. The air inside was thick with old paper leather bindings, and decades of silence swept under imported rugs. Outside, the clatter of brunchware and distant murmurs faded like a dying engine, the last vestige of a family gathering unraveling from its core. Gregory stood by the window, stiff as a statue, staring out at the withering rose garden. Vanessa leaned against the bookshelf, arms crossed, her reflection fractured in the glass frame of a dusty portrait. Nathaniel sat slouched in the high-backed armchair once reserved for Grandfather Bennett, quiet hands clasped, no longer haughty, just hollow. I remained standing. My presence was no longer a request. It was a verdict. Gregory spoke first, his voice rasping like a threadbare coat. "You don't understand how things work, Sloan. In business, in family." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't use that word like it still means anything here." He turned. For a brief second, his face contorted, part grief, part disbelief. "I had to choose someone. I couldn't hold the company together and let it fall into chaos. Vanessa." She stayed. Vanessa's scoff sliced the room. "Stayed," she said, her tone bitter. "I fought. I clawed. I did the work no one else wanted to do. You think I wanted to take her place? I had to." She left. I faced her. "I was pushed." Vanessa's lip curled. "You always had the moral high ground, didn't you? But what did it get you? Isolation. You couldn't stand not being the smartest one in the room. And you couldn't stand being the second." Nathaniel let out a slow breath. "You're both wrong," he said, voice lower than I remembered it ever being. "I wasn't better. I was just chosen." He looked at Gregory, and something inside him broke. "You told me to take it, that I was the future. But I never built a damn thing, Dad. I just followed your orders and hoped it wouldn't catch up." Gregory's shoulders stiffened. "I did what was necessary. For who? I snapped. For your legacy, for control. You erased me from my own work. You let my name vanish while you held press conferences in my honor. The silence was thick, unforgiving. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate. You all didn't fail me. You failed yourselves pretending I was disposable. And now you have to live with what you made. Vanessa's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Her pride wouldn't let her. Gregory turned away again. Cowardice draped itself over his back like one of his expensive cashmere coats. I reached into my bag and placed 3 documents on the mahogany table. One for each of them. Civil complaints, intellectual property theft, defamation, clear charges, real consequences. Nathaniel leaned forward to read his own name. You're suing all of us. I'm correcting the record, I said simply. Then I turned without another word, letting the finality hang like smoke. Let them sit with it. The silence, the papers, the truth. Let them feel for once what it means to be abandoned without warning. I didn't slam the door on the way out. I didn't need to. Justice isn't revenge. It's oxygen after drowning. The sky stretched in pale November blue above the private tarmac, the kind of cold clarity that followed storms. Wind traced invisible fingers across the concrete, brushing my coat back as I stood beside the waiting jet, its engines quiet for now, but coiled with readiness. Lorraine stood beside me, clutching a slim manila folder. Gregory Kim waited near the ramp, his stance half military, half friend. 2 former soldiers from EchoSafe's earliest days lingered nearby, arms crossed, but eyes warm. I recognized one of them from a briefing in 2021. He didn't salute. He nodded, like equals do. Lorraine handed me the folder. Her expression was calm, proud. They said they'd like you on board, she said. As a strategic advisor, you'd have your own lab, your own schedule, full clearance again. I flipped open the folder, a letterhead from a government defense research institute. Below it, a short paragraph, respectful, confident. They didn't see me as a liability or a mistake. They saw me. They know about EchoSafe, I asked. Enough to trust you built it right the first time, she said. I nodded slowly, tucking the folder into my carry-on. Behind us, the mansion stood invisible over the trees, a silhouette in memory, not geography. My phone buzzed. Gregory. Families shouldn't be broken like this. I stared at the message. Not out of anger, not even sadness. Just absence. I didn't open it. I locked the screen. When I looked up again, Lorraine was studying me, that quiet, sharp gaze she always saved for the most important moments. You know, she said softly, he'll never understand why you walked away. He'll think it was because you were hurt. I smiled. Then let him. We began walking toward the jet. The low hum of the engine flickered to life, matching my heartbeat, steady now. Halfway up the steps, I turned back to Lorraine. Do you still have that old nickname for me? I asked. She squinted, the beginnings of a smile teasing her lips. You mean the one your grandfather gave you when you rewired the comm system behind his back? I nodded. Her voice lifted just above the wind. Yes, Commander. I breathed in as if for the first time. Then I climbed aboard, sat down, and reached into my coat. Inside was a new blueprint, still warm from the printer that morning. Across the top, just one word. Athena. In silence, the truth echoes loudest. The lights dimmed over the conference hall as the final slide of my presentation faded into black. For a heartbeat, the room was still, thousands of silent bodies' minds processing the closing statement not as a command, but a mirror. Then applause. It began at the front, a clean, crisp rhythm, then rolled like thunder down the tiers of seating in the National Cybersecurity Auditorium. Some stood. Some stayed still, watching me the way one might watch a survivor step out of fire. The moderator stepped up. We now open the floor for questions. I nodded once, steady. I had done harder things than speak. A woman with press credentials stood. Miss Bennett. Sloan. I corrected gently. She adjusted. Sloan, in light of your recent recognition by the Department of Defense and the public unveiling of the Athena Initiative, do you wish to respond to the allegations that the Bennett Group attempted to suppress your role in Project EchoSafe? I tilted my head, thoughtful, not avoiding choosing. I'm not here to name names, I said. The world already knows them. A pause. But I will say this: when you build systems to protect lives, to guard integrity, the worst betrayal isn't theft. It's silence. We must speak when it's hardest, not for vengeance, but because honor isn't something you inherit. It's something you choose every single day. More silence. This one softer, heavier. A young student raised his hand. If your family apologizes, would you forgive them? I looked at him, no older than I had been when I first joined the military research team. Hopeful, untouched by power games, still believing the world might be fair. I hope, I said slowly, that if they ever apologize, it won't be for my sake, but for theirs. Murmurs. Then more applause, this time, not thunderous but resolute. The moderator gave the nod. The screen behind me flickered alive again. A logo, a stylized owl's eye, sleek and bold. Athena Initiative, U.S. Strategic Tech Defense 2025. Director, Sloan E. Bennett. The room rose. Reporters jostled forward. Flashbulbs caught fragments of awe and recalibration. But I didn't linger. I walked down the steps, through the aisle, calm, not triumphant. Whole. At the last row, I felt it, the faint static of a stare that held too long. I didn't need to look. He was there. Gregory. Back row. Civilian coat. Silent. No one noticed him. No one turned. And I didn't stop. Didn't falter. Let the truth echo in the hollow he had carved. Let him hear it alone. Outside, the air was cold, but I was breathing. And this time, the oxygen was mine. The moment she walked out without looking back, the story was no longer about what they took, but what she reclaimed. Betrayal had left deep scars, but truth wielded with precision had cut deeper into the empire of lies. Justice isn't a stage for spectacle. It's the silent rebalancing of what was wrongfully tilted. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Some victories don't roar. They walk away, blueprint in hand, while the guilty remain seated in the back row, finally hearing the echo of what they tried to silence.